All right, so in chapter 4, we're going to be discussing forecasting. Okay, what does it mean to forecast something? That's
Needs to predict what kind of occupancy and everything we'll have.
okay, so it means to predict the future. In this case, we are going to kind of predict what our future occupancy is. Okay, we use data from the past in order to predict the future. Okay, this is the formula that we're going to utilize. The rooms availability formula. And what we want to think about with each line item is we want to think about what does this particular action do for our inventory? Does it add to our inventory or does it subtract away from our inventory? Okay, so our inventory is rooms. So if we have someone who is a stay over, which means they're not checking out, what does that do for my daily inventory? Does it add to or take away? It takes away. They're going to stay over, which means they're going to take away, they're going to still occupy that room. Okay. If it's out of order, I'm going to subtract that. Okay. We very rarely will sell an out of order room. Okay. Depending on what the reason why it's out of order. If it's out of order because the light bulb is a specialty light bulb and the bedside lamp doesn't turn on, we might sell that to the guests and let them know, hey, by the way, your bedside lamp isn't working, okay? Or if it's because the toilet had a malfunction and it flooded the room and the carpet is wet, we're not gonna sell that room, okay? So sometimes, depending on what the situation is, we may decide to sell an out of order room, but traditionally we're going to subtract. Expected arrivals, does that add to or take away from our inventory? It takes away from our inventory, okay? If they're expected to arrive, okay? Those are basically all of our reservations, if you will. Expected walk-ins, it's gonna take away. Overstays, meaning they're supposed to check out today, but they're having so much fun that they want to extend one more day. Takes away. Someone cancels their reservation, what does that do? It adds it back into our inventory. If they're a no-show, it adds it back into our inventory, and then understay, they're supposed to leave tomorrow, but they had an emergency and have to leave today. It's gonna add it back into our inventory, okay? So the majority of them are gonna be subtraction. Those last 3 are gonna be added. So remember, they cancel, or they no-show, or they check out early, that's gonna add it to our inventory. Otherwise, it subtracts, okay? So let's do some actual numbers. So we have 500 rooms total, okay? We have 100 stayovers. That does what? Add or subtract? Subtract. Out of order? Subtract. Expected arrivals? Walk-ins? Overstays? And then we add the last 3. Now you can't always just say add the last 3 because in a few minutes we're gonna actually change it to where they're all mixed up. Okay. So if I start with my calculator, start with 500, and what I would do is I would just go straight down the line. Okay, that way there's no confusion. 500 minus 100 minus 5 minus 75 minus 10 minus 5 plus 7 plus 3 plus 5. I have 320 rooms available to sell. Okay. See how that works? I have 320 rooms available to sell. Now, what is my occupancy percentage? How do we find occupancy percentage? Alondra. Okay, so we are going to divide something by 500.
Total room nights sold.
Can we divide 30? Can we divide 320 by 500?
I mean, you'll get a percentage.
We can get a percentage, yes. That's not going to be our occupancy percentage because those are the rooms we still have available to sell. So how many rooms are actually occupied?
Yeah.
Right? So 500 minus the 320 is 180. That was a good guess because we are going to divide two numbers, but in this case, we're going to divide 180 by 500, and that gives us 36% occupancy. Okay, 36% occupancy. That's one way. We could do Alondra's way. 320 divided by 500, and that's going to give us 64% occupancy. Sorry, 64% of our rooms are still available, right? So if 64% of our rooms are still available, then the other part, the 36%, is occupied. So you can do it one way or the other, but you gotta pick one way and stick with it, that way you don't confuse yourself. Okay, so you can divide this 320, but that's the 64% available. So you'd have to subtract 100 minus 64 to get what our occupied is. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Let's do another example. All right. So I want you to calculate the number of rooms available, and I also want you to calculate your occupancy percentage.
You don't have a lot.
Check your answers with your neighbors, see if you got the right answers. You can also check the screen up on the board to see if you got the right answers. Questions about how we got these? We have 4 rooms available to sell. So if I have 4 rooms left, that means 96 of my 100 are occupied. So I actually have a 96% occupancy forecasted. And I want you to look at this information right here. If I take these numbers and add them up together, what's 22 plus 2 plus 75 plus 2 plus 1? We add all of these together, we actually get 102. So if I were to look at this, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm oversold by 2 rooms. Okay. But we want to take into account, we typically are going to have some cancellations. Okay. We might have some no-shows, people that don't show up. And then we might have someone that's going to check out early, just one understay. Okay. So that adds those 6 extra rooms back into our inventory to give us our forecasted of 4 rooms available. Okay. Our forecast's always correct? No, they're not. What happens if we don't have 3 cancellations?
We were still oversold.
That's fine. Oversold.
Then I have 1 room left, right? Because I can't add those 2. I've got these 3 right here that are going to cancel out. This -2, I'll have 1 room left. If I don't have someone understay, that means I'm right at 100% occupancy. But if everybody shows up, I'm at 102% occupancy. Can you be over 100% occupancy? No, we can't. Okay? So that's why sometimes, for those of you who work in hotels, you may look at your forecast, and it may say that you're forecasted to have 102% occupancy. That's us playing the game, trying to figure out, we want to get as close as possible to 100% occupancy. So sometimes we may oversell our hotel with the understanding that we might have two people not show up. And then that way, if they don't show up, I got 100% occupancy, right? But what happens is if I stop at 100% and those two people don't show up, I'm no longer at 100% occupancy. I'm only going to have 98% occupancy in this case with 100 rooms. Okay. And so this is what we do when sometimes we will oversell. Airplanes do it all the time. Have you ever been to a situation where they call like, hey, we need 2 volunteers. We're gonna give you $400 in vouchers to come and volunteer to step off the plane and take a later flight. Okay, it's because they're oversold. And they do that because, same thing with hotel rooms, once that plane takes off, we can't drop somebody in that seat. So they may oversell with the intention that at least one or two people are not gonna show up. And then, oh my goodness, everybody showed up. Okay? It's what happens. They're allowed to do that. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, my question was only, and we've talked about it kind of briefly before, was so it's the same legal rules with airlines and like hotels. So it's in the clause that should you arrive and this is overbooked, like you can't sue us, like these are the remedies, like we're
So
gonna.
yeah, that's a good question. I've actually never read the small print from hotels, so might be something for me to consider. I have a couple of reservations out there right now, so I might read the small print and just see what that says. But in that instance, we walk a guest.
Mm.
Okay, it's the industry, we call it walking a guest. We're gonna walk them to either the similar type of hotel, maybe it's in the same brand, or the same level of service. So if somebody is at the Grand Hyatt and the Grand Hyatt is all sold out, the Grand Hyatt may have a relationship with the Marriott River Center. That's a full service hotel a block away. And then if the Grand Hyatt is sold out, they may walk people over to the Marriott. Or if they're not, if they want to stay within the same brand, then they have the Hyatt Regency Hotel, which is a little bit further away than just one block like the Marriott, but it's a sister property, so it's a Hyatt. Um, and so they can walk them over there and they'll take care of you. At that point, typically when you walk a guest, the guest does not pay for their hotel room. And the guest does not the guest does not incur any charges. So we may walk them over to the Hyatt, and A, you're not gonna charge them for their guest room, and B, they're not gonna get charged for their hotel room over there. You're gonna pay any kind of transportation costs, so if you need to call an Uber or call a taxi, then that transportation cost is covered by walking them to another property, okay? Now, it also depends on what that fine print is, because I can tell you, those of you who work in hotels, you may be able to corroborate this. My understanding is that if you have to walk a guest, what type of reservation are we gonna look first at for walking a guest? Oscar.
I mean, our hotel, we walk only the people that are not members of Marriott, Bonvoy, and like
Like the first person they.
Yeah, so if they're not a member of our our loyalty program, like Marriott Bonvoy, Hilton Honors, okay? Those are some of the last people we're gonna consider walking. The very first person we're gonna consider walking is we're probably gonna look through the reservations, and if they either booked not out, if they're not a member of our loyalty program, or if they booked by a third party, right? They booked by a third party, they don't have any loyalty to us. And so we may go ahead, because the issue with walking a guest is that when you walk a guest, it creates a negative impression on your hotel, and they may not ever want to, you may lose a lifetime guest by doing that. And so if they're already a third-party guest booking, they already don't have loyalty to your program. And so, or to your property. So oftentimes the first thing we look at is who booked by a third party. They're the ones that are probably gonna be walked, okay? Or, um, we might look at people that have either booked directly with us, but they're not part of our loyalty program, or the lower tiers of our loyalty program, right? It's unfortunate to say, but usually the top tiers of the loyalty program, I had a student who worked at the Courtyard downtown, and they were oversold by 3 rooms. And so they called all the loyalty people that had reservations just to confirm that they were actually gonna be there. And what's the top level of Marriott Bonvoy?
Ambassador.
Ambassador. They called an ambassador and they said, yes, I will be there. And so they ended up walking a guest, and then that ambassador never showed up. They never showed up, and so they canceled it, which then charges them 1 night room and tax, cancel reservation. Then that ambassador just turns around and calls Bonvoy hotline and it's like, I'm an ambassador, and they refund the money back to the person, right? It's really unfortunate that people that have that higher tier take advantage of the system and not understanding that I've now walked somebody because you guaranteed, I did my due diligence. I called and I said, I just wanna make sure or she called and said, I just wanna make sure you're still coming. I will hold a room for you. And then they ended up not even canceling, they just didn't show up at all. And so then they were at 99% occupancy instead of 100. Plus they had to walk somebody, which is not a great situation. So what we're trying to do with this forecasting is trying to figure out, you know, Valentine's Day is coming up on Friday. Okay, so our occupancy is usually different for Valentine's Day when it's on a Friday versus when it's on maybe a Tuesday or a Wednesday. If it's on a weekend, people tend to want to do little staycations, okay? Now downtown, what else is happening this weekend?
Or the rodeo.
Well, the rodeo's happening, yes. We also have a major convention. I think it's 30,000 people for Texas Music Educators and Texas Band Masters. TMEA is here this weekend. It's always this weekend. Sometimes it falls in line with Valentine's Day, sometimes not so much, but it's always this weekend in February is TMEA. And so now you add that on top of, we have Valentine's Day. What is that going to do to our rates? And what do we do? Do I want to risk overselling my hotel even by 1%? If I know that I'm gonna have a convention and if I'm sold out, all the people that I walk my guests to, chances are they're probably gonna be sold out as well. So knowing when you can or cannot go above 100% is really important, okay? All right. So here we go. This one, I think this one's all mixed up. Nope, I guess this one's still not mixed up. I don't know when I was gonna mix them up. Maybe it's on the homework that I mixed them up for you guys. Cancellations, we still add no-shows and understays. Subtract all of these. Right? So we start with our 800 rooms. We end up with 185 rooms available for sale. So that means 615 are occupied or projected and forecasted to be occupied. So that's an occupancy of 76.9%. Okay, questions, comments, concerns about how we get those numbers? All right, so now let's talk about our demand periods. We have unconstrained and constrained demands. How many of you have heard of the concept of supply and demand? Okay. Who can tell me, Alondra, what does supply and demand mean?
I just had my.
Okay, that's fine. Anybody else? Supply and demand. Soraya.
Supply is when that business or company has the literal like materials or things that they do have with some in stock.
Okay,
Demand is what maybe how much, sorry, what the customers or a person wants that those materials. You
okay,
get what I'm
cool.
saying?
So we have the supply is what we have available. So in our hotels, what is our supply? Our rooms, okay? So our rooms are our supply. Our demand is the number of customers or guests. Okay? In an unconstrained situation, that means our supply is high and our demand is low. Meaning we've got a ton of rooms available, but there's nothing going on in our city that's gonna have people be booking our hotel rooms. Okay. Constrained is when our supply is low, our demand is high. We have a constrained situation where we have a limited number of hotel rooms. We have a lot of people that want those hotel rooms. Okay. So which situation do you think our rate is higher? Our rate is higher in the constrained. Our rate is lower in the unconstrained. We may decide to lower our rate during an unconstrained time period because we want to get people in our hotels. Okay. But in that constrained time period, that's where we're primarily, potentially going to get our rack rate. Remember, that's the highest rate that we can get for a hotel. The highest rate per night we can get for a hotel, that's our rack rate, usually is behind the door. And it's posted in a very conspicuous place for somebody to see. Prevents price gouging. Okay, it prevents charging people more just because of a time of constrained demand. What are some examples of times where we might have constrained demand? Final Four is coming up. So major special events. Yep. I tell you about my friend that owns the quality or the comfort suites. $500 a night, $2,000. $2,000 to stay at a comfort suites for 4 nights. And she sold out like that. Right? Now, I learned this when I went to the THLA short course recently. You can change your rack rate whenever you want. I think, Samantha, do you remember what the time frame is? I think Scott was talking about it in one of the legal ones. I want to say you have to give 60 or 90 days notice to the state of Texas before you can increase your rack rate. Okay. I think it was 60 or 90 days notice to the state of Texas of why you're increasing your rack rate. Okay. And again, that prevents like there's a hurricane in Houston and people are coming from Houston to San Antonio, they're displaced for their housing. Hotels can't overcharge and use that as a time of a price gouging. Okay. So some different constraints that we use. Capacity allocation, we'll talk about that in just one moment. We want to look at rate threshold. So when it gets to a certain amount, we may go ahead and have a certain range of rates that are acceptable for us to be able to identified during a specific time of unconstrained versus constrained demand. The stay control, this minimum length of stay, or this is called close to arrival. Close to arrival means we stop taking reservations, no more reservations, okay? The Westin Hotel, right when the pandemic was letting up, the Westin Hotel, I think, has 300 rooms. They only sold 200 rooms because they didn't have the housekeeping staff in order to clean all 300 rooms. If they, well, they could, but it would be really stressful on their staff that they had. So they decided to close to arrival. We're not sold out. We don't have 100% occupancy, but we're closing to arrival. We're not taking any more reservations because we don't want to overwork our staff. Okay. Close to arrival also occurs sometimes when there's a high profile guest. So celebrity, government official, we may close to arrival so we don't have a lot of extra people that are not part of that group also in the hotel for security purposes. So we may close to arrival for those types of things. Essentially, we're not at 100% occupancy, but we're making the decision to stop taking reservations. Okay. Minimum length of stay is just like what I explained for my friend from Comfort Suites. She put a 4-night minimum length of stay. If you want to stay at my hotel, you have to book for all 4 nights. If you want 3 nights, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Okay? Because remember, think about that activity that we did on the first day of class. If you wanted to take a week-long reservation, but you only had 3 of the 7 nights available, you can't take that reservation because the reservations that were on the books were already canceling those out. So if you know that you're going to have a special event that's happening, I experienced this when there was one year I wanted to run one year I ran the rock and roll marathon or half marathon. I can't remember which one, but I think it was the half marathon that year. And I wanted to stay at the Palacio del Rio downtown because the starting line was right outside the hotel. And I just wanted to stay on Saturday night because the race was Sunday morning. But when I called to make my reservation, they said, no, you have to either stay Friday and Saturday for 2 nights, or you can stay Saturday, but you have to stay Sunday for 2 nights. Because what they don't want to do is that they give it to me as a local person and they're sold out on Saturday night. If someone that's visiting wants to make a reservation for Friday and Saturday, they can't do it because I've already made Saturday night sold out as a local. And so that minimum length of stay is a great tactic to make sure that we have the right guests in the right rooms for the right rate. Okay. So let's talk about capacity allocation. When it talks about market segments, what do we mean? What are the 3 major market segments that we deal with in a hotel?
Business.
Okay, so
leisure.
business is one. What's the next one?
Leisure.
Leisure, okay. And group. So those 3 types of markets, as a revenue manager, you can say, what is my allocation? What am I allowed during this particular time? Okay, during the week, we might have a larger group allocation. People are coming in for a conference. Now, what's the difference between business and group? Because there is a difference. Yes.
A business traveler may be maybe 1, maybe 2 people, but a group is like a company.
Yep, absolutely. So that group may be like a whole conference or a whole group that's coming in to stay. Whereas a business traveler may just be 1 or 2 people. Exactly. Okay. So for example, when I worked at the La Quinta, we had a business account, we had a business rate with HEB because the HEB headquarters were right across the street. And so we had a corporate account where we would have business travelers from HEB and they would pay $86 a night. Okay. As a corporate agreement, all they had to do was show me their ID. And that proved that they were a current employee of HEB. Okay. So business and group are slightly different. So we, as a revenue manager, we may say, okay, of my 100 rooms, I'm going to allocate this many for group, this many for leisure, and this many for business. okay? And then during like spring break, how many rooms do you think we're gonna allocate for group business during spring break? Probably none, okay, or very little, depending on the number of rooms we have in our hotel. Because most of it's gonna be leisure travel, okay? But during, I don't know, like the third week in September, how much leisure travel do you think we're gonna be allocating during that third week of September? Probably not that much, right? On the weekend, yes. But on the week, probably not a lot. Probably be more group and business. Okay. So as a revenue manager, you want to figure out what your market mix, what your sales mix is, and what you can allocate to each different group. Now, let's say a sales team comes up and they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to go over our allocation with this particular group that wants to come in. My allocation is 100 rooms for sales for groups. I have a group that wants 150 rooms. The revenue manager then has to evaluate, which is what we'll go over in chapter 7. We're going to evaluate whether we should take that group or not. Okay. Did you have a question, Madison?
Yeah, how many people have to be in like a leisure group, to become like a group traveler?
It usually depends on the hotels, but it usually is 10 room nights or more. It's considered a group. Like, so at 10 room nights or more, the sales team would take over as that reservation versus just making the reservation through the website.
So if I'm going on like a family vacation,
Yeah.
which is like 5 people, it's not a group.
Probably not a group, no. Yeah, and the difference between leisure and group is oftentimes when you're doing group reservations, you often can get a group rate. So you're actually asking for a different rate than what's actually being posted. Yeah. Okay, so different types of reservations, regret and denial. So basically, this is from the hotel's perspective. So if we deny somebody, it's because of one of those those stay controls. It's also maybe because we already sold out. We can't take any more reservations. Okay. So we're basically denying a reservation. The regret is from the guest's perspective. So the guest sometimes decides not to stay with us. Okay. So when we have reservations that cancel, we can also look at our that's yellow. That's not a good color. We could also look at our Google Analytics. Now, I'm sure websites have this data available. The only one that I'm familiar with is somewhat familiar, not an expert in by any means, is Google Analytics. So Google Analytics, I took a class at North Texas one time. Basically, it analyzes the data from your website. It tells you where people got to your website. Did they go to Hilton.com? Or did they go to a Google search and do Hilton hotels? It can tell you when they entered your web page or your website and what page they left your website on. So if they came in and started looking for reservations for specific dates and ended up not booking, that's a regret. Somebody calls the hotel and says, hey, I'm just looking for the dates. I'm looking for the rate on this date. And they decide not to book with you. That's a regret. Okay. After I took this class, I actually realized that Google Analytics is really creepy because it literally tells you whether people came to you from, like, if you click like on a Facebook ad and it takes you to your web browser, Google Analytics can tell that retailer that you came to them from Facebook, or you came to them from Instagram, or you came to them from a Google search. So it kind of helps people realize where their traffic is coming from, but it also tells them when people leave. And then it has your demographics. So are you male? Are you female? What age group are you in? So who is using your website? Who's not using your website? So all that data is stored and people can actually go and analyze it, which I thought was really extremely creepy. Made me question whether or not you needed to actually read that article or if I should just keep moving on. All right, so pace of build. Basically, we're gonna go over this kind of just really generally. Pace of build just basically tells us where we are, what pace are we on to meet either our goals or where we were last year. So if we look at this, okay, in 2020 and versus 2019, in January, we did not quite meet where we were supposed to be. Okay. We were 6 rooms shy of what we did in January, the previous year. Now in February, we're 75 rooms over what we did. Okay. So think about this as being like this is our group bookings as of February 14th. So I know as of February 14th, my group bookings are already good for February. Okay. January's in the past. I can't change that. But I can look at my pace for the rest of the year. So, am I on pace or above pace for March? I'm above, right? 2020 is 440. In 2019, I had 426 rooms. So I'm beyond the pace of 2019. What about April? So I'm under by 40 rooms. May,
Under.
significantly under, right? June, I'm good by 10 rooms. July, so I'm going to circle the rooms that were circle the months that were significantly under. That one's good. October, we're significantly under. We're under by 75 rooms, so we'll put that there. November and then December. So I am analyzing this pace. We can identify which month do you think that we should focus on our sales efforts? Okay, so October, we're short by 425 rooms. Okay. What about November? 0, 6, 260? December's pretty low. Okay. What about July? What's our shortage in July?
12?
Okay. And then May, 2, 182, I think. Okay. So looking at these numbers here, April, if I'm in February, I might look at April and be like, okay, I'm 40 rooms off. Okay. If somebody calls for March, or if somebody calls for March, I may say, you know what? If I can get you into April, if your dates are flexible and I can get you into April, I can give you this deal. I can give you this incentive to move your dates to April. And then that would help me meet, obviously, you wouldn't tell them, it would help me meet my goals, right? But that's the strategy. That's what we're trying to do. If we look at the same thing for June, somebody says, hey, I'm calling for this June family reunion. Okay, great. June, I'm set. But if you would consider moving yours to July, if possible, then maybe I can give you, instead of a comp rate of 1 to 50, I can give you a comp rate of 1 to 40. So that means you get more comp rooms based on the number of room nights you're going to book. Okay. Or let's say it's a meeting group, I'll give you a complimentary snack break. So that coffee doesn't cost that much. But if it means getting you into and filling those room nights on a month that I'm really low. Now, if we're talking February, October, November, December are still pretty far away. Okay. 8 to 10 months away. So I personally, if I'm looking at this, July would be my month because I'm 212 rooms that I'm short in July. And so this analyzing this pace of build this is what your sales manager, this is what your director of sales is doing when they're analyzing the future dates coming up. What do we have for bookings? And what dates can I now try to manipulate my strategy to make sure that we're filling those room nights on those specific months, okay? So pace of build essentially is kind of what we can also do this for occupancy percentages. We're typically looking 7 days out, 30 days out, 90 days out on our occupancy to see what our projecting what our month is going to be. Okay. Oh, look at that. I totally forgot I had all that written down there. Let me erase this. Oh, that's because it's on Zoom or on PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. So by looking at this, for the year, I'm still only 1,200 rooms under for the whole year. So that's about 120 rooms a month. Okay. Because some months have gone over what that booking is. Okay. So sometimes we might look at the quarter, we might look at the whole year, but definitely looking at those months that are going to have the highest priority for us to fill those rooms. Okay. We can not only forecast our our revenue that's coming in, we can also forecast our expenses. How many of you have worked front desk or housekeeping? Okay, how do we know how many housekeepers to bring in?
This depending how many rooms are sold
Yeah, depends on our
Luckily-
occupancy.
by the forecast.
Good. And we can do the forecast. We can look, okay, my forecast, we have 100% occupancy next week. So I need to have all my housekeepers in. Or next week's gonna be really slow. I'm only gonna be doing certain number, maybe just my key housekeepers and like the full timers, and the part timers may have to take a few, maybe shorter hours, shorter shifts that particular week. Okay. This is all based on our occupancy. So we can also forecast our expenses, not just our revenue. Do I need to order enough amenities, little bars of soap, little bottles of shampoo, if I'm only at 20% occupancy versus 100% occupancy? No, so I want to keep my cost low based on my forecast as well, right? Questions, comments, concerns about forecasting? So you do have chapter 4 homework assignment. Let me open up Canvas on my phone so I can look at that. I also need to do attendance real quick. Let's see. Anya and Sarah. Okay, cool. So in on your assignments, I believe it is chapter 4 rooms available. Yep. Chapter 4 rooms available. Basically is what we did. There is a document that I would recommend that you fill out. Okay, I'm gonna put it up on the screen right here because I don't have it. What is it? There it goes. Okay, so there's chapter 4. There's a document that's in the directions of the assignment. I would recommend you print that out, do the work, and then just type your answers into the quiz. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns about that? Actually, let me go ahead and log into Canvas online because I need to change that due date for identical net revenue. If you already did the identical net revenue, great. If not, it won't be counted late. So chapter 4 rooms available. Again, if you download this document, You're gonna have your rooms available and your occupancy percentage, okay? And then also, we're gonna do one more step and do the identical net revenue. Okay, so I would do your identical net revenue assignment first and make sure you got that down, and then come and do the chapter 4. So rooms available, occupancy rate, and then the new occupancy rate for your identical net revenue, okay? Questions, comments, concerns? The last question is gonna ask you 2 different scenarios of identical net revenue. And then which one, if you're forecasted 1 month out and forecasted 1 week out, which rate change would you opt for based on that forecasted time period? Okay. So that is that one. And then let's do identical net revenue. Oh, I see it's under homework. This is I already changed the due date. Okay, cool. So it's February 18th is the due date for identical net revenue. All right. That's all I have for today. Thank you. I will post all these recordings we made today. I'll post them in Canvas.